Can you tell me what a dark pad is? Or what about a synth lead? What's the difference between an ARP and a sequence? If you had trouble answering any of those questions, then this video is for you. As a worship keys player, it's important to be able to identify and use words to explain what you're hearing when you listen for parts in a song. So today we're going to talk about different kinds of sounds and some of the common terms that you may hear to describe them. And by the end of this video, you too will be able to identify what kind of piano this is, and what style of pad I have layered underneath. And how I add texture to this patch with this kind of sound. Most people know what a piano is and what it sounds like, but what most people don't know is that there are lots of different kinds of pianos, each with their own unique characteristics. A piano can sound big and full or soft and delicate, and those characteristics contribute to making songs feel the way that they do. For example, this is a grand piano. I would use this kind of piano in a song that has a lot of instruments, is upbeat, or gets really big dynamically, so that what I'm playing doesn't get lost in the mix. A lot of worship songs use grand pianos. To give a stark contrast, this is a felt piano. Notice how much quieter it feels, almost as if we're in a small room together and found a dusty old piano and decided to play around with it. I love this style of piano and the emotion it evokes, but it does have some limitations to what it can do. It doesn't get as big as a grand piano, but a grand doesn't get as intimate as this one does. Here's another example, an upright piano. This one is generally pretty bright in tone, but that can vary depending on the instrument. An upright piano has a smaller physical box, as in the wood around the soundboard and the strings on the piano is physically smaller than a grand piano, so the character is different. It's not as rich as a grand piano, which has a bigger horizontal soundboard. It has less dynamic range and generally doesn't project nearly as much. So in total, it's just smaller. Under this category are also electric pianos, digital pianos, harpsichord, dulcimer, harp, and any other instrument that has a pretty quick response when you play it, and is playable across the majority of the keyboard. A pad is a sustained sound that provides a harmonic foundation that exists underneath other musical elements. In fact, it's what you're hearing right now. If you're a worship keys player, it is very likely that you've heard this term. So let's expand on your knowledge. Let's talk about these descriptive words that people use alongside the term pad. Warm pad, dark pad, soft pad, bright pad. All these words can be subjective to a point, but there is a general understanding of what these terms point to and how to categorize sounds within them. So bear with me, we're going to get a little technical, but it's all to give you a better understanding of what these words mean. A warm pad is a pad that exists mostly in the low and mid-range of the frequency spectrum. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what the frequency spectrum is. Imagine all the notes you could ever hear, and even those you can't are on a graph from the lowest to the highest. Every note exists on this graph, and every note has a fundamental or an original frequency tied to it, and that frequency is a number, like A440, which is this A on the keyboard. And its frequency number is 440. So depending on the instrument you're playing, when you play a note, there could be a number of harmonics or additional frequencies that sound when you play a single note. This is what creates the complexities and unique timbres of different instruments and the sounds they create. So, to generalize a bit, when I reference low frequencies, that's generally going to mean lower notes and harmonics that exist within that lower range. Same with mid frequencies or high frequencies. So when I say that a warm pad exists mostly in the low and mid range of the frequency spectrum, I mean that you're not going to hear a lot of high notes or sounds when you play it. Here's an example. Warm pads are generally rich in sound and feel like a full and solid foundation that you can build other musical parts on. To contrast, a bright pad is a pad that exists in the higher range of the frequency spectrum. This means that there will be lots of higher harmonics and frequencies that sound when you play a note. It'll feel sharper. Some could describe it as sparkly or shiny. Here's an example. A dark pad, similar to a warm pad, exists mostly in the lower frequency range, though it's not as low as a bass or a sub-bass. Dark pads usually feel muted, as if the high frequencies are just sucked out of the sound. Here's an example. There are a lot more terms to describe different types of pads. We'll link a couple of our videos talking about this in the description below. A lead is a sound that is prominent and attention-grabbing, usually carrying a melody that provides a focal point in the mix. These sounds are usually meant to be able to play quick riffs and melodies, but the characteristics can vary greatly. Like pads, we could use quality-driven terms to describe leads, like warm leads, bright leads, and so on, but more commonly with lead sounds, we focus on the function rather than the quality. So some examples that you may have heard are big leads, mellow leads, pluck leads, mono or poly leads, and so on. So let's talk about a few of them. Big or bright leads are designed to stand out in the mix. They usually provide a dense harmonic footprint with lots of high frequencies, but sometimes mid and lower ones too. Typically, they'll be pretty responsive when you play, so the attack and release times will have a lower value. Here's an example of a big lead. To compare, here's a sound that I would describe as bright, but not necessarily big. This sound has mostly high frequencies, but isn't as powerful in the lower range like the big lead was. Pluck or stab leads refer to the ADSR, which stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release, also called the envelope. A pluck or stab lead will have a short attack and a relatively short decay or release. These sounds won't sustain, so they're great for playing quick riffs or using in an ARP or a sequence. Remember that lead sounds are categorized by function, so these sounds could be bright, dark, mellow, distorted, or anything else you could think of. The quality doesn't necessarily matter. Here's an example of a pluck lead. And this is what I would consider to be a stab lead. Let's talk about mono and poly leads. Mono means one or single, so a mono lead would be a lead that only allows one note to be played at a time. You'll often hear sounds that glide from one note to another or have a smooth transition from note to note, and this is what creates that effect. To contrast, a poly lead is a lead that allows multiple notes to be played at a time. So a sound could be a poly lead and a bright lead at the same time, or it could be a mono lead and a dark lead. There are infinite combinations for how you could describe these sounds, but having these functional, figurative boxes to put them in helps us to understand them better. Next is one of my favorite types of sounds to play, but before we get to that, I did want to mention that all the sounds you hear in this video are coming from the Sunday Keys app, recorded straight from the app with no post-processing applied. The Sunday Keys app has hundreds of sounds and instruments, easy to use and layered together with any keyboard. I'll leave a link to learn more in the description below. Now on to arps and sequences. An arp is a sound that compiles all notes that are being played and outputs them in a particular pattern that's selected by the user. Most arp sounds will utilize an arpeggiator MIDI effect to accomplish this. So when I hold down a chord, it will take all the notes I'm holding down and output them in a pattern that I select within the effect. A sequence is slightly different than an arp, but to the listener, it may sound similar or the same. A sequence is a series of notes that are output when you play a single note. Sequences are created by using a sequencer MIDI effect, selecting the input note you want to play to trigger the sequence, and then programming what pattern of notes you want to output when you play that input note. Sequences are more customizable than arps, while arps remain more flexible than sequences. Both sounds can function in many contexts, but you might find that one is a better option for you than the other. A bass sound is a low-frequency sound, often made to imitate the function of a bass guitar in the mix. There are many kinds of bass sounds, but you'll most often hear them categorized by what instrument they're trying to replicate. For example, you've probably heard these terms: synth bass, sub bass, acoustic bass, electric bass, upright bass, and so on. Synth bass usually refers to a low frequency sound that can get brighter via modulation or distortion of those low frequencies. A sub bass is like a synth bass, but usually provides a more pure tone and doesn't get very bright. Sub can also refer to a bass that is even lower than the typical bass sounds. Electric bass or acoustic bass are sounds that were likely sampled or recorded from real bass guitars. They will still sit in the lower register, but will probably have more character and harmonics to them than a synth or a sub bass. Now, remember when we started the video? I played a few sounds for you. Let's see if you can identify each one. So this sound is a felt piano. And the second sound is a dark pad. And this third sound is an arp. Leave a comment below and let me know if you got all three sounds right. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our educational content just like this. Let me know which of these terms was the most surprising to you in the comments below. See you next time.